Hi everyone and welcome to this week's Friday with Fenning. In March of this year, Comic Relief took place, and despite the changes to the usual format and having a virtual audience, Red Nose Day raised a colossal £62 million to help people in the UK and around the world. And their approach to raising money is quite blatant. They make people laugh and then they hit them with some images of some children dying, bereaved parents, concerned celebrities. And why do they do that? Well, they know the power of the visual. Seeing affects us, it grabs our attention, it brings about a response. And we live in a very visual world with images bombarding us all the time. There is immense power in the visual because it can inspire us, it can influence us. That's the power of advertising. The visual can shape our thinking and our self-esteem as we compare ourselves to slim-toned models on the TV. And some images will prove unhelpful and damaging. In the same way, there's immense power in imagination. I mean, just where you are, picture yourself in your favourite holiday location. Maybe you're on a sandy beach, or you're swimming in a turquoise sea. Maybe you're skiing in the mountains and it's crisp and sunlit and beautiful. I mean, do you remember those holidays? Well, with imagination, we can go anywhere without moving a muscle. Through the power of our imagination, brilliant novels are written, new inventions are introduced, great paintings are achieved, because imagination is a gift from a highly creative and imaginative God. And as you and I know, there's always this shadow side to the visual and to imagination. The visual feeds our imagination. So when we see images that exploit or lie, or images that mess with the mind and with relationships, and they get linked with our imagination, we can venture into places that we should never go, reducing people to being objects for our pleasure. And we can do it still looking good because no one knows what's really going on inside our head. And never have exploitative images such as pornography been so readily accessible to us. Today it's just one click away on our phone or our computer. And in 2017, one porn site released viewing figures for the previous year, and the analytics showed that an average of 64 million people were watching porn on just this one site on any given day. 64 million people each day. And that's just one of millions of porn sites. Now, I tell you this because it feeds into one of the 7 deadly sins that can wreck our lives and spoil what God intended for good. And that sin is lust. Now, lust and love are opposites. Love is giving, is wanting the best for the other person. Love values others as an expressed through kindness and generosity and selflessness. Whereas lust is getting what I want when I want it. Lust is selfish, it's manipulative, it's consumeristic, it's addictive, and it devalues and dehumanizes others. It messes with our head and we make excuses for it and we try and validate it. When we don't get what we want, we tell ourselves all kinds of reasons why it's okay to get a quick sex fix. But the word pornography comes from a Greek word called pornua, which originally used to be an economic term describing goods going through the market being bought and sold. But it later became linked with sexuality and prostitution, someone who sells their sexuality and turns their body into a product. And whenever human beings become products, selling themselves, they are then consumed by others and move from being treated as a human to being treated as an object. That's pornography, when people become products or objects, when we consume them for our own lust and pleasure. Do you see how devaluing of humanity that is? Recently, I watched Running Wild with Bear Grylls on TV, and he was joined by Brooklyn Nine-Nine leading actor Terry Crews, who shared, as they were doing their various activities, he shared about his previous porn addiction that had almost wrecked his marriage and family life. He said, "My issue with pornography is that it changes the way you think about people. People become objects. People become body parts. They become things to be used rather than people to be loved. And he was very honest about his struggle and his battle to overcome his addiction. You know, in a letter, Paul wrote to some Christians in Ephesus, a city that hosted the goddess of fertility called Artemis, where ritual prostitution was rife. And he includes these words and he says, let there be no sexual immorality. And he uses that word porneia, no trading of sex. He says no impurity, that's taking something beautiful and twisting it, or greed among you. And the word that Paul uses for greed is linked to that addiction for more. You know, craving something when you get it, all you want is more. It's when you have to go further the second time in order to have the same excitement as the first. And pornography plays on this greed. That's why hardcore porn is so prevalent, because it needs to go further in order for people to get the same level of fix. It's this downward spiral. And Paul says such sins have no place amongst God's people. He calls people to be to a different way of living, one that honours others, that guards our hearts and our minds and values people and values the beauty of sex within the safe context of a loving marriage. In his book, Every Young Man's Battle, Steve Arterburn tells of a young guy who is struggling big time with his thought life. He was into pornography and lust and sexual fantasies. And he says to God, he says, God, this is just not fair. I can't continue to wrestle with this every day. You know, you give me these desires and it's like wrestling this giant sumo wrestler every single day. It's just too big. And God responds and he says, no, the reality is who you're wrestling is a 9-stone weakling who is just no match for you. The reason he's now a sumo is because you keep feeding him. If you want to win, you've got to starve the sumo. Starve the sumo. I like that. I like that image. But how do we do it? During Jesus' lifetime, he came out with some extraordinary statements. And one of the things that he said was this: if your eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. Now, did he really mean that? I mean, if I watch something that I shouldn't, should I make myself blind? Well, of course not, because that wouldn't solve the problem. You don't need eyes to think bad thoughts. But what he's saying is this: take radical action, or starve the sumo. So what steps can we take to help beat this? Well, first of all, we have to acknowledge that we struggle in this area. If we do, be honest with ourselves and with God. Stop blaming others and take responsibility for our own struggle. Secondly, we should ask for help. We need to talk to a friend or a church leader or a counsellor or a trusted person. You know, sharing our struggle stops it being our little secret, and it brings some accountability and some next steps. You know, there's a brilliant website called XXX Church, that's xxxchurch.com, that provides resources, but it also gives support and community to people struggling in this area. Thirdly, take action. Put software on your devices to block access to unhelpful material. It's all out there, it's free. In a way, it's equivalent to an alcoholic cutting out all alcohol by refusing to enter off licenses and pubs. So we need to take action. There's also an accountability software that's available. There's a free version where you choose 2 people who will be your accountability partners, who will receive reports every fortnight of any questionable sites that you may have visited. And the partners are also alerted if you try to remove them from your list secretly. And having accountability is often a great deterrent, because when we know others will know if we've been watching something unhelpful, it will often put the brakes on us even going there. And this software is available at x3watch.com. That's lowercase x, then the number 3, and then watch.com. Fourthly, we need to pray and ask God to erase from our mind the images that we've seen and replace them with positive images. Paul writes in the New Testament again, he says, fix your thoughts on what's true and honourable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. You know, lust in the cold light of day is a horrible sin that devalues other people, and we devalue and shame ourselves too. It's purely centered on self and on selfish desires. But it's just not an easy sin to beat, which is why we need to guard our hearts and minds. We need to take radical action and starve the sumo. But also, please know that this is a forgivable sin. It's no different to anything else that we do wrong. We don't need to live with shame because, as I said last week, if we confess our sins to God, He can always be trusted to forgive us and take our sins away. Now that is a promise worth holding on to. Hey, thanks so much again for watching, and I hope this weekend is a good one and that you manage to enjoy meeting up with people once again. Many thanks, and you take care.